Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Irons07 doing another White Star 101 Basics. Today we're going to talk briefly about different ship loadouts, battleship loadouts you'll tend to see. And in this one, it's going to be easier to use the Hades Star Compendium app, which is both on iOS and Android platforms. Really useful app, has a ton of information, and I'll cover a lot of what the Hades Star Compendium app or HS Comp app does in a separate video. This one again is specific to battleships in a White Star and the different kinds of loadouts you'll tend to see. Now, disclaimer up front, this is by no means exhaustive. There are many different builds to do. There are new meta builds coming out all the time. I'm just covering some of the ones I tend to see a lot. And just to prepare you for just some of the basic terminologies also that we use at United Industries of Hades Corp. So when your commander starts talking about a raider or a fisher, a civ guard, a gatekeeper, these are some of the more common ones. Again, they're all situational. Your mileage will vary. Your levels of tech will obviously vary, things like that. So again, this is by no means definitive. There could be a whole series on loadouts and different ways to do different things, but things that you'll commonly see. So I'll start off up here at the top, the Raider / Bond, or we call Fishers. We'll go ahead and load up this battleship a little bit here just so you can see. Again, what we're mostly interested are the technologies that are equipped. I'm using a Battleship 6 level. That's at least the tier that I play at a lot. Things will vary, obviously, with different levels of battleships, as you will have different amount of slots available. For the most part, I'll cover the basic Raider for now, or attacker. Most of the time on a Raider, you're going to be seeing things for speed, mobility, and kind of a quick hit. They're not there to slug it out generally with other battleships. Their whole point, for the most part, is to get in and, if they can, kill as many civilian enemy ships as they can, so miners, transports, relic drones, as quick as possible, and then get out, typically using Destiny as their preferred method for escape, which also does quite a bit of damage when you level it up a lot. So another great way to finish off any remaining ships in the area, and then tend to head back to the jump gate, the corporation jump gate, to jump their ships out for healing and mod refreshing. So these tend to come in waves. You tend to have a couple of them at a time. Usually you'll see 2 or 3 kind of working in concert. Again, depends upon how competitive the team plays. For weapons, you're going to tend to see usually mass battery as the most common. And the simple reason there is it's a really great civilian destroyer ship or module. So multi-targets, can shoot a whole bunch all at once. Most civilian ships, again, transports and miners have 1 health, so the DPS doesn't matter so much as much as it does how many targets it hits. So very effective. Mass battery, it tends to be a common favorite here. Next up is Delta Shield. So Delta Shield, if you've never seen it, it is more or less, I would say, in the most part, you're only going to see this in a White Star. Its entire shield benefit is pretty weak, honestly. It doesn't add a whole ton of shield. What it does do, though, is gives you a percentage bonus boost in movement speed for that battleship. So basically, the ship moves faster. And this becomes really important in a White Star. Mobility and ability to get across the map quickly is a key component of an attack raider. Next up, Time Warp. Time Warp, as you get higher and higher in a White Star, you'll tend to find more and more ships equipped with Time Warp. Again, ability to move quickly, ability to react faster is just key and critical the higher you go up in a White Star. So Time Warp, again, is going to also improve cooldowns. But again, for this, you're generally using it to combine with your Delta Shield, so you're moving as fast as possible under normal circumstances. Next up, you'll see Impulse. Impulse is a really great mod. You will see it occasionally in Blue Stars. I rarely ever see it in a Red Star or anywhere else. Other than a White Star, is probably its most common, followed by Blue Star. I do see uses of it occasionally in Blue Star. But again, Impulse, what it does is it applies a speed multiplier for a short duration to quickly move ships, quickly move the ship that's activated it. If I remember the math right, it is a 4 times speed multiplier. And then the higher level your impulse goes, the longer it lasts. Now, there are some interesting mechanics with it. There are certain people on the server that can tell you a little bit more, who have done a little bit more digging on it. But in general, your first handful of ticks of activating impulse are the fastest your ship will travel. And then towards the end, it actually will, while it's still consuming the final seconds or ticks left on your impulse, you'll actually be moving really slow. So anyways, there's some little bit of optimization there. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Just know if they've got impulse, these ships can move very, very quickly. They can cover a whole sector in like 10, 15 minutes or on average. So again, very, very fast. It again just allows them to move very quickly. Also, it prevents the ship from shooting while under impulse, so it will not shoot. Also, it cannot be shot at. So it acts almost like a stealth for a short duration. Again, you have to be moving to activate it. Again, and that's the general use of impulse. It's to quickly move into position, especially on a raider like this. Your whole goal is to get into, is to cover distances on the map as fast as possible. So you'll tend to use your impulse to shrink the available window for your opponents to react to your move. So that's generally what you'll see impulse used for. Quickly get into range of something, especially towards the end. Destiny tends to be a favorite of your traditional boom raider. And again, the whole point of it is, at least as of now, as of this current build, which we're in end of January 2023, Destiny is an instant mod. What it allows you to do, as long as there's an enemy in the sector, it has a slightly smaller radius than a standard weapon does, but everything under that will take a set amount of damage. Now, that damage is different based upon white star versus red star versus blue star. You can look up all those values in the Hades Star Companion map, which is what we're in. You can go into the tech sectors and go look at what a level 10 Destiny does versus level 12. We also have some commands on our server built in the UIH bot that will output those values for you. But again, Destiny's a great one. And there's a couple other reasons why. But Destiny will do a whole lot of explosive damage instantly. In the tick you use it, and the second you use it, you apply it, and immediately goes kaboom. Does a whole bunch of damage in a fairly tight radius. And then the ship that uses Destiny, will randomly land on an asteroid or planet somewhere else on the map. It's supposed to be random number generated. It's just going to land someplace. It will be disabled for a time period. If I remember correctly, it is 8 hours in a white star. But so basically, your ship, it teleports, if you will, instantly to another location. But it is disabled for a period of time in which you can't shoot, but you can still activate other mods. Very common. So one of the strategies you'll tend to see with boom raiders, especially before they hit level 12 or level 6 battleships like this, you'll definitely see, again, a use of a player rolling in with their mass battery, using a delta shield with time warp. They'll definitely use an impulse. Commonly, they'll use impulse to quickly get out there. They'll usually typically teleport into an attack. Very common to see when a group of miners are moving from one sector to the next or from one asteroid to the next. Usually they're pretty slow. And so what a raider would do is they would quickly impulse. They get into range while they could be out of range of the destination. They can quickly use impulse to get there, to get into range, and then even just finish the last move as a teleport. And they'll tend to land before the miners can get covered or land at the next destination to react. And at which point, if the battleship ends up getting suppressed, which is pretty common in higher level in matches, you'll see a ton of suppress, which will inactivate the guns on that raider ship. That's when they'll typically end up pulling a Destiny to get out. Teleport, again, I'm not going to cover it too deep here, but really critical mod for White Star. It does have different AU radius compared to red stars and yellow stars. You can, again, look up those values, but you'll tend to see most people just only level up their teleport as far as they need it for their red star. So it's pretty normal. Beyond that, you generally won't see a ton of teleport 12, but it does exist. The final mod that you'll tend to see, and this one, it tends to switch around. It depends if you have the blueprints and the credit capacity, but Bond is a favorite of a lot of raiders. Because you can typically, especially with impulse, you can chain these things, so you can actually push a barrier out of the way. Bond essentially allows you to connect another enemy ship, any kind of ship, almost any kind of ship. I don't think you can bond a flagship, but you can bond a battleship, a civilian ship, of an enemy, and whatever that distance you have between your ship and the bonded ship, if you start moving, that ship will move equidistant with you. So it'll basically kind of just chain the ships together, and you'll be able to drag them, move them, and there's a lot of interesting play there. I won't cover all of it with bond, but primary uses for bonds are to push, at least on a boom raider like this, generally to try and push away a barrier. So you'll see commonly where a ship will be lurking nearby a fleet of civilian enemy ships. There will be some escorts around it with barriers active, so the attacker can't get in. What'll generally happen is they'll tend to use a bond with an impulse to quickly bond the enemy ship that has the active barrier and push it out of the way, darting in and then usually exploding on top of the civilian ships, hopefully chewing through the blast shield in order to destroy the enemy ships. So it is a fairly common use, and that is your typical boom raider. Again, this bond mod, it can be switched. I've seen people with suppress with it. I've seen people put in barriers. I've done all this myself. Fairly common. You'll see all sorts of different builds here, but the standard mods here are generally speed mods along with high damage mod. And so that's generally what you'll see on your attack raiders. Now, there is another battleship in a very similar configuration that has a lot of the same mods, but its goal is different, and we call them fishers, so that they like to go fishing. And their primary use isn't so much destiny as it is the bond feature. There are many play styles in which you can capture an enemy ship and you can bring it back into a cluster of your ships via bond. So the fast-moving ship with not a lot of, it doesn't want to do a lot of PvP, if you will. It doesn't want to do a lot of one-on-one fighting with an enemy battleship because that delta shield is pretty weak and tends to, again, equip max battery, which isn't great 1v1 on an enemy battleship. But they'll tend to come out, bond an enemy ship, and quickly bring it back to their allies that tend to hang out nearby, clustered, and they'll bring that enemy battleship straight in there and get roasted pretty fast by that cluster of allied battleships. We call those fishers. There's a couple different strategies there. They tend to involve leap for the most part, but I'm not going to cover leap mechanics in this video. It's a fairly advanced topic, but there is a method. Without leap, you can still use a very similar loadout. You probably would drop the destiny in lieu for a barrier or a suppress, but they would dart out, bond an enemy battleship, teleport backwards, and bring that battleship with them into, again, that cluster of allied ships to die. So great way to remove enemy support from their civilians. Next up, very common setup is what we call guards or civilian guards. These are escorts for the miners for the most part. Their whole goal is to counter enemy attackers, just like that raider and the fisher. These guys, their whole goal is to try and shield the civilians, the miners typically, so that they can do their mining and drop their hydrogen. And so the guards are typically there to provide support. They tend to equip their single target weapon, so usually battery or laser. They tend to carry blast shields and the whole point of the blast shield is to absorb the destiny damage. So that is one of the most common ways there. You'll tend to see them with that. Time warp, that way that your civilian ships don't need to equip time warp. They can either equip teleport or sanctuary or some other module. So they'll tend to carry the time warp. Very common, they'll carry a suppress. You'll tend to see a lot of suppresses on anything that is not an offense ship in general. Suppress is the common meta right now. A lot of ships will carry it. Very, very useful mod. And again, its whole point is it blocks the primary weapon on a battleship. So really, really useful. As it levels up, it gets an increased distance or radius in which it can be used. And it also increases in duration, how long the effect lasts. It's very common. You'll see a lot of suppress. That way that mass battery is useless, and that ship will, if it tries to just stay there and tank the damage against a battery 12 or a laser 12, that raider tends to die, even though this ship only has a blast shield. Again, it doesn't need to worry too much about taking direct damage because of that suppress. Next up, you'll see barriers. Barriers are super common on a lot of White Star ships. You'll see them on offense ships. You'll see them on defense ships. You'll see them on guards. Barrier is kind of king at this moment. For if you don't know what else to equip a barrier. Barriers are extensively used in white stars. I think they're fairly common in red stars about level 7 and up, red star 7s and up, and you'll tend to see them even in blue stars. Barriers, again, prevent enemy movement within the radius of the effect. As they level up, the radius increases every few levels, as well as duration. So barriers tend to be incredibly useful. Bond is also useful. You can use bond again on the defense if the enemy is coming in and you have a bigger bond than they do, you can just simply bond them, and then you have control over where their ship's moving. Again, fairly useful. You can use it for countering another enemy's bond. So if they bond you and you bond them right back, it breaks bonds. Both bonds cancel out. So really good use for defensive ships. Finally, teleport. Teleport tends to be on just about every ship over a certain level, and the reason is it's faster. It's faster than traveling under your normal your normal movement power for your ship. Teleport tends to move faster. About level, I want to say it's around TP level 4 or 5. It tends to be faster in a white star. Also, it's really good about breaking enemy bonds. You can't bond a ship that's under teleport spool, so it can really useful to break enemy bonds. So teleport, again, it's also for mobility. You could be traveling from one asteroid to another in a long interval, and say an enemy ship somehow is trying to slip beyond you. You can use teleport to cancel your move and start to move towards where the enemy ship's going. So fairly common build. There are a lot of other variations to do here as well, but these are probably the more common ones. And then the last one I will cover tends to be a gatekeeper, as we call them, your GKs. Gatekeepers tend to, depending upon the map, if there are pets or Cerebus ships, as we call them, that you can bond and capture and bring them back to your jump gate. So that's Colossus and bombers. They used to have interceptors and guardians and sentinels in white stars. I don't believe those exist anymore. There are now just only storms and Colossus and bombers. For Colossus, this is a typical, again, the levels aren't important here, but you'll tend to see dart. You can use a dart to keep a leap active to your allied jump gate. If it's if it's a bomber, you'll tend to see weak battery equipped instead to shoot down the bomber's rockets. Again, and the whole point is just to keep a leap option available back to the jump gate. So these guys will sit on the jump gate most of the game. Their whole point is just usually to keep a captured pet or a captured Cerebus ship in range of some sort, depending upon what the ship is, so that you can keep an active leap option to your jump gate. Blast shield's fairly common on them. You'll see that because, again, of the bombers. If there's too many bombs and the rockets start to stack, or bombers, if there's too many rockets, you'll tend to see the rockets start to stack up, and there's some weird stacking mechanics. And it can start to get into range of your jump gate, which can cause issues for civilian ships. So you'll tend to see blast equipped there. Time Warp, again, you'll see Time Warp equipped for just generally providing a speed bonus for anyone near the gate. Tends to be for those relic drone launchers we talk about in another video. Suppress tends to be very common because they can tend to, the gatekeepers, even if they're not actively keeping a gate or a pet, they can actually head out away from the jump gate. And they'll tend to have much larger suppresses than what's shown here, but they'll tend to use suppress on, say, enemy ships that are being drugged backwards by the fissures. But then they'll just simply teleport back to the gate at that point and refresh their mod in the yellow star, jumping back in up to every 2 hours. Barrier, again, tends to be pretty common. That's to keep the pets in place or just to keep enemy flagships from attacking your gate directly, which is not a common usage, but does happen, especially if you have a pet. The flagship can be a nuisance. So you want to be preventing your enemies from being able to attack your gate. You'll tend to see rockets or alpha drones equipped. Delta rockets are one of the more favorite mods at the moment. It's one of the new meta builds that I'm not covering here. It's a pretty advanced topic, but Delta rockets are simply useful because they can go through barriers. They don't do a ton of damage until they start to get really leveled up. But even then, they tend to be weaker, if I'm not mistaken, than other rocket types. But again, their primary benefit is they can go through enemy barriers. So they're immune to barriers, which is great. But you also tend to see alpha rockets equipped on gatekeepers. Alpha rockets can be launched from the jump gate sector, where delta rockets cannot. You'll also occasionally see Omega rockets. These are a lot slower. They travel, if I'm not mistaken, at the same speed as a battleship without the Delta shield. They do a lot more damage, but they do get caught in barriers. I can't remember, as of this video, I'm not huge on using Delta rockets myself, but I don't remember if you can even use Delta rockets within the jump gate. You may need to be just outside. But again, they tend to be slower, and I believe they have a limited radius as well, where like the Alpha rocket doesn't have a limited radius, and I don't believe the Delta rocket does either. So great for gatekeepers to, again, send rockets across the map. And then again, you'll tend to see bond. A lot of that's positioning of pets or positioning of enemy battleships you've kind of captured and you're just keeping near your gate, trying to just annoy the enemies and remove an enemy ship from respawning unless they disband. There are all sorts of other mods here that are really fun as a gatekeeper. You'll see alpha drones. Let me back up a little bit out of the app and we'll go just strictly over to other modules, not trade modules, support modules. Again, you'll occasionally see EMPs, not too often. EMPs has certain uses on battleships. A lot of it is to stop miner movements. So if your miners are heading into a dangerous situation, they've already waypointed and they're en route, and you want to pause them while you get some other friendly ships in the area to go take care of the threat. EMP is a really useful mod to get your whole fleet, your whole civilian fleet stuck temporarily in between asteroids or planets. Teleport's a very, very useful mod overall. Again, tons of usages because it's faster travel. You won't see red star extenders generally in a white star. They don't work. Remote repair has uses. It's exactly like it's described in the module. I've seen it occasionally, but it has a very long cooldown in a white star, which generally renders it more or less, at least less commonly used. Time warp we've covered. Unity does have uses, especially if you're in an entry-level white star. Unity can have some great usages. You can click through it and you can see, again, some different levels here. It provides a percentage bonus damage per allied ship, per player, I guess, better said, per player, not just allied ship, but per player in the same sector as you. So you can really ramp up damage even if you have a low-level ship, low-level weapon. Unity can really stack up pretty quick if you've got a whole bunch of friendly ships in the area. Sanctuary, you should know what that is by now. There is some interesting uses with stealth. So stealth will make your ship, at least visually, transparent on the map. Your enemy will still see them, you'll still see them, but they can't be targeted directly by standard weapons. Stealth has its uses. It's kind of a more of an advanced topic. They'll tend to combination with a vengeance. And I won't go too deep on vengeance. You can read about it, but there is a combination here. You can use these two mods together for quite a very powerful play. Fortify, uncommon, but does happen in a white star. You will see that from time to time. Impulse we've covered. Alpha rockets we've covered. Salvage is uncommon in a white star just simply because if you're going to get into fight, you generally have better usage of your mods. There's just not a ton of extra ships to blow up to gain the benefits from salvage. We've covered Suppress, Destiny, Barrier. Did not mean to click there. Vengeance we haven't covered, but Vengeance is a little bit trickier to use in a white star. If you're not confident in your Vengeance skills, I do not recommend equipping it. Again, there are very specific situations in which Vengeance is incredibly deadly, but for low level, especially low level, entry level matches, Destiny tends to outperform Vengeance, just with how much easier it is to use versus Vengeance. Delta rockets, I wouldn't sweat it unless you're starting to get to Red Star 9, 10, and above. Leap as well. There are usages of it, but I'm not going to cover them in this video. Bond, again, we've covered it quite a bit. Laser turret. Interesting one. I have yet to see a really, really effective laser turret. I've seen it occasionally used. The downside with laser turret is it has a very large white star matchmaking weight, or I call MMR. So you can see down here at the bottom of it, there is a weight. Even at level 1, it's 1,500 points. That's a lot, especially for a level 1 mod. Very, very heavy weighting. I just have not seen laser turret. Really, I feel like it costs too much in terms of weight matchmaking potential versus its benefit. I have seen it used. I've seen it even used effectively, but very uncommon. And typically tends to be at very high levels. Alpha drone definitely has its uses. It's an advanced topic I'm not going to go into. Spawns an extra little drone next to you that does a fair amount of damage. Very useful in stacking up from the gate. A gatekeeper could use an alpha drone to start to stack up a little fry station, as we would call it, or just a station of clustered allied ships in which the fishers could go bond, drag an enemy battleship into it, and those alpha drones really start to stack up, and they can do a heavy amount of damage. Suspend, I'm not going to cover here. It slows down area. It's almost kind of the opposite of a time warp. Rarely used. I don't think I've actually seen a suspend used in a White Star. I know that people have used it, but again, not too common. Omega rockets we've covered. Remote bombs I'm not going to cover as well. They are a Red Star 11 tetrahedron unlock blueprint. Again, not really appropriate for an entry-level White Star, but there are usages for it. It does have its play. This video is going a little long, but I'm going to quickly jump into flagships. It's the final ship type that you'll see in a White Star. You get one per corporation. And the flagship modules, basically it is an extra ship. It does have a battery equipped to it, and it levels up as the flagship levels up, which you'll pay for, and also your corp level has to increase for it to work. But it starts to, again, increase in damage as it moves up. Its radius stays the same. Immolation tends to be very, very useful. It is used to instantly destroy any Cerebus ships within the same sector as the flagship. Very, very powerful tool if you're trying to remove storms, Colossus, or bombers. Recoil also tends to be a very, very popular flagship move. It allows the flagship over a cooldown or a spool time. There it is. It's over here. It has an 8-hour spool time or activation delay. It can target anywhere on the map. And it will basically create a teleport while it's spooling there. It will show you, your side, and the enemies where it's going. That is 8 hours to happen. It'll be there, and then I want to say it's 8 hours there, and while it's spooling back to come back. There are advanced usages here with Leap, where you can get a flagship to recoil out. You can use a flagship to recoil an immolation against enemy or just Cerebus ships. And you'll tend to also combine those with the flagship stealth. That way you don't lose your flagship when it's out there. You can even combo the stealth. While it's stealth, you can still use immolation to blow up the Cerebus ships. I'm not going to cover these extra ones. These tend to be in much higher White Star mods or White Star teams, but uncommonly used, but they are there. Most teams in general tend not to level up their flagship beyond flagship stealth mod. And that's just simply because of the matchmaking weights for the corporation flagship. So again, you can see even just a level 1 corporation flagship, it's 5,000 points, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Again, it just starts to really increase. I think most of our highest level players in United Industries of Hades are, on average, their total matchmaking weight for all of their unlocked tech usually is in the range of 40 to 60,000. And so this alone, the flagship, automatically just applies that much to your team. Regardless if you're using the flagship or not, just the option to have it, it weighs a lot. Anyways, you can see all these different values on here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. We've now covered, again, the basics of battleships, some very common mods you'll see on different styles of ships. If you have questions or want to know more, there are definitely tons of people who are very experienced on different modules to equip on battleships. You'll spend a lot of time, at least I did, I've spent a lot of time upgrading modules. Specifically, I've only really used in White Stars. I find it's one of the most fun matches in Hades Star, and it's kept me playing for almost 3 years. Anyways, hope you liked it. If you have any questions or comments, drop a question in the Discord, or go ahead and you can even reply in the YouTube video. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.